against what is coming to us like a tsunami, the cult, the occult, in many regards, of Islam, which is the worship of Satan. The characteristics, the description of Satan in the Quran equal to that of the description of Satan in the Bible. And you watch how many of these so-called churches actually agree with Rick Warren and the Word document. Leif Anderson, if I remember correctly, signed that document. He was at one time the president of the Evangelical Association of America. The National Association of Evangelicals, the NAE, the National Association of Evangelicals. See the word evangelical. What does that even mean anymore? What does the word Christian even mean? Tucker Carlson says, I'm a Christian. Well, Tucker, even the demons believe in Jesus and shudder. You know, a year ago, I said, pray for Tucker that he'll repent or that God would judge him in front of the whole world. Then a few months ago, I said, well, he's had a year. He's gone too far. Now I'm done praying for Tucker to repent. I'm praying for God to judge Tucker Carlson for the whole world to see. Kind of ironic, within a few weeks, Tucker Carlson walked right into the trap. And guess what's happening? And he's being repudiated by many. Oh, yes, I believe God has given over Tucker Carlson to Satan. And you just keep watching, because I think God is using Tucker Carlson to warn the world as God judges him right here in the natural world first. Take care.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the vice commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Well, look, the barbarians are no longer at the gate, they're inside. And I think Democrats got us so focused on illegal immigration, we weren't looking at all of the people who are coming here, who do not share our values, who do not want to integrate into our society, and do not want to assimilate. And Mandami, having just moved here 8 years ago, is a great example of that, become a citizen. Look, it is clear with much of what I have read that he did not meet the definition to gain citizenship. And given that we've seen an investigation in Minneapolis where they looked at 1,000 people and they found 500 engaged in immigration fraud, I think we need to look and see who was allowed to come into this country. And if they do not share our values and they were not honest, they need to be sent home. And I think that starts with Mamdani.
Welcome back to Truth Thursday. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, friends, we live in a chaotic America created by us. Let's face it, folks, we have allowed the chaotic society we currently live in to be created by our own decisions, primarily on who we have voted for repeatedly. A communist and Islamist will now be mayor of New York City. You just heard his name, Mandami. It is time for us to consider non-career politician candidates across the board. We must elect normal citizens who will put Americans first in the fight to protect liberty. We got to tackle the huge crime problem created in large part by the mass illegal immigration of the last 20 to 30 years, and create an economy where a young man can get married, have children, and buy a house to live the American dream. Well, my guest today is Lieutenant Colonel retired Mike Pierce, a PhD, a decorated Army veteran, officer, advocate, and Republican candidate for Congress in Illinois' 11th District. Mike brings a unique blend of real-world military leadership and grassroots community experience. He served 20 years in the U.S. Army, including combat deployment in Iraq and later as a DoD contractor with the U.S. European Command and AFRICOM. He's continued his fight for veterans, founding organizations to help service members transition back into civilian life. His campaign was born from a 15-year fight with government bureaucracy, where he was denied promotion due to administrative errors that were finally corrected in 2025. That personal battle against an unaccountable set of systems shaped his mission to restore accountability, defend liberty, and put government back in service to the people. Mike is also the author of a great book, The Overlord Effect: Emergent Leadership During a Crisis, a historically based leadership review that draws on firsthand accounts of the Normandy veterans and applies them to today's challenges in the military, business, and organizational leadership. Mike, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, sir. I'm very excited about being able to, share with a fellow veteran and, senior leader. We've tried a lot of the same values, and we have a lot of the same ground that we've shared. So very excited to be here talking to you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for stepping up and running. America needs non-career politicians, and I know I said that when I was talking about Mondami, but he is a career politician. He's never had a real job. He's been in the country 8 years, I think, and never had a real job. He's just only been in a political office. So I'm glad that you're doing it. We need more of you. I've done it myself, and I encourage others, especially military veterans, to do it. Mike, let's talk about your book for a second. Great book, great title. I haven't read the whole thing, but I took a really close look at it as I prepped for the show. Love the approach. What led you to write this?
I was back in 2005. I was working for Major General David Zabecki, and he is like a multi-headed general officer over there at U.S. Army Europe. And one of his hats was to be the DoD 60th anniversary coordinator for the Department of Defense. So as his executive officer, he had all of these accounts of veterans that I was supposed to collate for him. And I said, "Hey, sir, you think I could use these on my dissertation on leadership?" And he said, "Well, that sounds like a great idea, Mike." So he was like working for my grandfather. And he ended up becoming the co-chair of the committee, actually. So he was the senior most historian in the Army at the time. Tremendous opportunity, and really it inspired me. And I actually did the dissertation. I wrote it while I was in Iraq for 15 months. And so I was paralleling my own experience with those who had been there 60 years earlier at D-Day and all the different types of situations that they faced. So it was really a labor of love, because at that time there's a lot of DoD veterans from the 60th anniversary who was still around, and I wanted to get it finished, and just so many examples of different kinds of leadership and how we can apply that today in today's world is so important.
What are the kind of unique things that you discovered in that process about the different kinds of leaderships from D-Day that can be applied today? Give us a couple.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Yeah, one thing is, and you probably know this just as easily, but fact is there's no one uniform type of style or skill or type of leadership. Different leadership applies for different occasions. A lot of it has to do with, the situation that you're in, what you're bringing to the table, and what you're facing. My study showed people that were just as mundane as maybe a driver in a Jeep that had to make a decision in order to save his comrades, or to make a decision of whether he crosses enemy lines after Patton had sent them south as a diversion, and they were one of the lucky few who were making it back up there. Or it could have been an enlisted guy who was having a knock him out, drag him out with some XO on another line while his position was getting shelled. So many examples of that. Basically, if I could sum it up, was this: people need to be able to step up to the plate, and that's where the emergent leadership during crisis, occurs. And a lot of us have emergent leadership over time, which kind of parallels that, but it's a much more longer, drawn-out process. But in a condensed situation where people have to think on their feet and take a step, when people do rise to the occasion, that triggers a catalyst inside of somebody, and they have a growth, and they're able to perform at a higher level, and it continues if those circumstances continue where they have an opportunity. So they apply themselves and they grow. We had guys who were privates when they enlisted, and by the time of D-Day, they were a company commander leading troops ashore or climbing up the cliffs over at Pontoc. I mean, it's just amazing what can happen in just a few short years with a combination of events and skill sets and circumstances.
Yeah, it's pretty, and it's amazing. One of the things that always uh, startles me is when I read about somebody that it just like it popped out like a flower under the situation. You would have never expected this particular individual to be able to do this type of activity and step up and lead in that kind of tough situation. But they do. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I think what happens is that we overlook a lot of the people who might be a little quieter in groups. A lot of
Hmm.
good leaders are kind of rebellious. As a matter of fact, a lot of our Medal of Honor winners, you go and study our Medal of Honor winners, a lot of those guys really displayed very similar, sometimes they're a bit of rebels, but yet their values were right and they were willing to put their lives on the line on behalf of their comrades, and they did extraordinary measures because of that. And so these triggers that are all around people and based on the circumstance and the time. So what we need to do if we want better leaders is put people in more leadership laboratory situations where they can step up and they can learn leadership styles and skills. And at the same time, when they fail, to learn from their failures. And today, you probably well know about, there's too much of a failure is the end of your career and that's it. One strike and you're out approach. And so we don't have the long, drawn out opportunities for people to emerge as leaders. As a matter of fact, General Zabecki said that a lot of your intrinsic people and people who are quieter, introverted people rather, actually make the better general officers. The majority of them are introverts as opposed to extroverts. But if you watch TV, you get the complete opposite picture of that.
Yeah, yeah, and even if you watch some of them, I'm an introvert, but I had to train myself to look like an extrovert, as
Yeah,
I
you have to
rose
train
up
it.
through command levels, especially. You have to train to
Right.
it. But you can train to it, but still have that instinct that you grow up with and that you're born with as an introvert. That's pretty interesting. The So you've decided to run for office. Have you lost your mind?
Well, I know my wife thinks so, and a lot of my friends. Basically, I waited till I got three kids out of college. My daughter's a sophomore in high school now, and I'm a grandfather now. I got three grandkids, and a grandson is amongst them. So the reason I did it was because of them for their futures. And so that's a really big motivating factor. You want to see that your family's taken care of. And I've done that. But what about their future? And what about my grandchildren's future? And what about my neighbors and my community and the culture around me so that they can grow up and be successful and achieve the American dream? So I decided that I was going to go after it. And my wife said, have fun spending your Corvette money because she's not going to let me buy one of those. And I respect that. So I'm about halfway through that, and I'm hoping at some point it won't just be my own funds, but I think that it's worth it to do it. And I'm so inspired when I was a kid growing up by the people who founded our country, uh, all those people down, whether they're in Massachusetts or Virginia or Pennsylvania, they weren't going to the Continental Congress for a paycheck. They're going to
Mhm.
lay everything on the line, and they're giving of themselves, their lives, their fortunes, and their family in honor on behalf of something called the United States. And today, it seems like virtually everybody has forgotten that. But I am going to honor their sacrifice for us, and I want to continue along in that vein. So to me, it's an honor to continue to serve, as I'm well sure that you're aware of. We're
Yeah.
called to serve.
Yeah, it's my wife would agree with your wife, by the way. The So tell us about Illinois' 11th congressional district. What's the lay of the land there?
Yeah, Illinois' 11th congressional is kind of a mixture of urban. It's got the second largest city in Illinois. It's got Aurora, and it's got a bit of what one would kind of term an urban, suburban, western suburbs, which vary from working class, blue collar to several of them are very affluent. Then we've got some rural areas. We've got one rural. We have one real stronghold of a large county included in that. That's a Republican county still. That would be McHenry County. And then there's several other counties, which we have parts of. There's a total of 8 counties, and specifically, I have worked in many of the places that comprise the district. We moved around a lot while I was growing up, so I have a great understanding of the district of all the demographics because I've lived at multiple levels in the socioeconomic ladder. And also, as you're well aware of being in the military service, you learn how to get along with people of all backgrounds because it's the mission first, people always, philosophy. And so we have to put ourselves second to what's important in accomplishing the mission, and that's kind of where I look at in this district. It's an honor, actually.
And is there an incumbent?
Yes, yeah. His name's Congressman Foster, and he's been in a number of years. However, I think the problem is he's a bit out of touch. He has some demographic challenges amongst like a lot of the Democrats are facing right now, is because he's got several demographics who don't make a majority of the district, but they make a plurality of his voters. And so because of that, he's not able to, he has to kind of pander over to those people on the left. And that pushes him on the more extremes in terms of his voting, and has kind of left our district out in the cold in many areas.
That's interesting, man. Yeah, it's politics is a strange business, but it's much like warfare, only hopefully without the violence, although that does spill over occasionally. And we'll talk more about your plans and some of your stances on issues and how that's going to resonate with these particular voters in the 11th. When we come back from this great break, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Mike Pierce, congressional candidate in Illinois' 11th district. Looking forward to seeing him win. We'll be right back.
You mentioned free speech, which we already know that people are being deported on the basis of not being able to have certain types of speech that this administration doesn't like. I mean, those are things that are happening right now in this country. You're talking about Europe, but that's happening here.
Yeah, well, I would remind you that over the course of the last several years, the left in this country has undertaken a massive effort to suppress the speech of conservatives. And to this day, the message from the left is,
I think
if you don't say what we like, we will engage in violent acts against you.
I'll let you and Dan in a second, but let's just.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and we live in a chaotic country, much to our own doing, much of our own doing and creation, and primarily because of who we vote for and everything. My guest today is retired Army Lieutenant Colonel and PhD doctor Mike Pierce, an author of a great book. Go check it out. Mike, our liberties are really under pressure and have been for several years, especially free speech. Charlie Kirk was murdered in public for practicing free speech, something he loved to do. I know firsthand that he was doing what he loved, and what he not only loved, but thought was the most basic value of American life was to engage those that disagreed with him in a respectful manner. What kind of policies will you pursue as a member of Congress to protect free speech?
that it's free speech has to do with the freedom of faith, freedom of family to raise your family as you want, and full freedom of expression. And I think that goes with the territory and their understanding that when people talk, you should at least what they've got to say, they should be allowed to, and so we need to safeguard that and not allow free speech to be regulated even when we disagree with it. And that applies secondarily, of course, to our faith. However, there's one thing about speech, real speech, that actually causes problems in terms of calling for people to be attacked or to be killed or to be vilified in kind of ways that we don't. And it seems like people are really going after people who are, particular on our side. Let's just face it. They've been calling. They were calling for murder. Basically, they got a hold of Charlie Kirk just because they didn't like what he had to say. So I would be certainly standing on any kind of legislation that mandates supporting our right to free speech, but not for people to call for speech where there's violence. That hate speech is a very thin line. What's determines as hate speech, because the next time they'll use it against us. So we need to make sure that there's a strong distinction between hate speech and calling for violence. That's super important. So any kind of legislation that goes for regulating, religious faith. There's some religious faiths that I may not agree with, but they have the right to practice them, so long as they're not calling for things that are unconstitutional or that would bring down or prevent other people from exercising their free rights. So those are the key areas that we want to maintain the line on, but at the same time ensure that there's freedoms on those areas.
Yeah, my audience has heard me often say that I lament that we no longer have an American Civil Liberties Union that would defend the right of the KKK to march, because our free speech values here in this country really demand for it to work, for us to defend the speech that we most abhor. And it's one thing for somebody to call for somebody to be killed. It's another thing to go out and do it. And I think that's where we need to really draw the line, because if we're not careful, we will continue to pass hate speech laws, which I completely disagree with. I think they're unconstitutional. Look, I don't like what the KKK does, and I don't like what the Black Lives Matter movement says about me and my family and my ancestors and everything. But that doesn't give me a right to do any act of violence or organize people to do an act of violence. And that's what's happening with the left, is they're organizing into acts of violence. That's what happened to Charlie Kirk, the young man in the affidavit that was just released said, I killed him because he spews hate. And that's what we've got to fight against. Don't we have laws that already do that?
Yeah, there are laws that are out there, and it's funny. The American Civil Liberties Union seems to have a floating level of where they think crosses the line. There's been a rise in anti-Semitism in America with some of the speech on one side where they've completely turned a blind eye. And there have been numerous acts of aggression towards people who are Jewish. Let's face it, that's what it is. There's a lot of anti-Jews out there. But at the same time, there's also a lot of talk about anti-Christians and anti-white. And for a long time, people were saying, "Oh, you're just making that up." But if you just listen to some of the speech and some of the words that they're just the other night, there's been a completely a change in the approach. And so there's hate speech is already there's already laws. If you break the law, you break the law. Why you have to have hate speech on there, added on and piling on? It just seems like it creates a society of the offended. Oh, I don't like what you said. So I'm going to call that hate speech. But it only seems to be applied towards people of one particular bent, whereas the rest of us people who might be on the conservative side might not be getting that kind of understanding or always believed, if you will. So, there's a lot of challenges with that. And the organizations that for so long fight so people could have the rights seem to have vanished. I remember many, many years ago in Skokie, Illinois, the Nazis fought so they could go and have a march through there. And that's a heavily Jewish town, for example, up in the area in Chicago. And they let them do it, because that was their right to express themselves. That was free speech. But at the same time, they didn't burn the place down. They weren't killing anybody. So it seems
Yeah.
that the expressions have completely gone beyond one point, and now we find ourselves where it's okay to let people attack federal buildings and federal officers. That's not what that's all about. That's not freedom of assembly. I mean, there's so many constitutional rights that people are taking liberties with, but they're ignoring the other parts of it. So it's a real mess. And I'm completely for people's free speech, but I'm not for violating the constitutional rights of everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. For instance, the example that's the most recent is the anti-Semitism acts on college campuses. It's one thing for the students to yell about Jewish people, even yell at them and the Jewish kids yell back. But it's a whole other thing to use acts of intimidation, even not even touching people, but acts of intimidation by surrounding them, blockading them into kids into a building. I don't care what side you're on. I mean, those type of anti-Semitic acts for kids to be allowed that to do that to Jewish students, that's the stuff we have to fight against, not the words and the yelling, but the activities themselves. And I think there's been a line blurred there because we allowed this phrase "speech is violence" to be popularized on the left in this country, and nobody called it out. And I think we just need to call a lot more of the left's craziness out and highlight it so everybody knows what's going on, and we can be on the lookout for these heinous acts. Because even just in going into a lobby of a lunchroom or something and forcing a group of Jewish kids to stay in the building, that is an act that should be illegal, and that is the kind of stuff I think we need to focus on more than just
Yeah.
words themselves, right?
Well, think about this. Think about this. 60 years ago, a little bit more than 60 years ago, people were trying to get onto certain universities in the Southeast, right? And there's,
Hmm.
the National Guard had to be called out so people could attend those courses. But I didn't see the National Guard being called out to protect that group of students. I mean, who's the next group of students? Because what this is, it shows a regression in societal norms. And another thing is, if they're not protecting that group, who's the next group that they're going to decide, oh, well, we don't like what you did, and 300 years ago or 200 years ago. I don't see, and there's an inconsistency in it. You don't see people going after French students or Russian students or other students whose countries may have taken and done some really horrible things, and nobody even talks about those countries, but they're always singling out that one particular group. So you got to ask, why is that? And so, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and we've got to do better as a society to remember to have that balance and to protect those students. And it's also interesting. Look, they used to want to have everybody be together. Now, last several years, they've been putting this. Well, we want separate, safe spaces. I'm like, it's great. It's a head scratcher, isn't it? If you'd
Yeah,
have
it's
done that
also
60 years ago, that was what they were doing. They would call it segregation. And nowadays,
Mhm.
that's what
Yeah.
they want. They want safe spaces for their specific alphabet coded areas of interest on the campuses. It's incredible.
Yeah, because that gets back to the implied that because I don't believe in somebody's whatever their it is, whether it's transgenderism or that they believe white people are racist or that Jewish people are committing genocide, whatever those are, because I don't agree with them from a educated perspective that. They have to have a space away from me. That's antithetical to free speech in the First Amendment, right?
It's antithetical everything that supposedly the civil rights movement was about for the last 60 years. Seems like it peaked, it culminated, and has gone into regression. And it's just sad that in quote the post-racial America that was supposedly heralded by Obama being brought into office, we've actually seen a worsening in our race relations over the last 15 plus years. It's very sad, and I think it's purely because one group of people recognizes by peeling everybody off and pulling Americans apart and our fabric of our society that they're going to try to weaken us. And what we need to
That's
do
a
to counter that is to focus on our values and what unites us and our positive, great contributions and the great things that make America a special place.
as we military officers say all the time, unity is our strength, nothing else. As
Roger
long as
that.
we're unified, it doesn't matter how different we are. You and I have learned that. I think we need to get that back into our education system, both public and private, as curriculum to teach that. You know, the motto "E pluribus unum" was not something just thrown on the wall to hang up there. It really means what the United States of America is that if we're not unified, then we're fractured and weak, and we could lose this thing. And we have to be unified regardless of how different we are. And everybody that comes here has to buy into that idea. And what's happening in New York City with Zoran Mandami is the exact opposite. His speech to accept was mean, hateful. I'll
Mhm.
use a Democrat word, hateful, but divisive. He's a divider,
Yeah.
like Barack Obama is a divider, and brought racism as a division back to every level of our society, where we had almost come as close to it, I think, as putting that in, back into the dustbin of history for the most part, as we could possibly do it as human beings. And Barack Obama brought it back, and now this Mondami guy, he's going to do the same thing in the city of 9/11. It's unbelievable.
It, it is unbelievable, and it's so sad. And you and I both have that background. You know, when people within the Army are different backgrounds, we come together and we're going to do a mission. And when we get people from the Air Force and the Army and the Marines and Navy, we come together and we're purple, we're joint, we're always unified. You know, unity of command is a basic principle of war, right? So
Yeah.
and as a nation, what's unified us has kept us together and allowed us to grow and be great. And yet people want us to be looking backwards. Well, you can't move forwards if you're always looking backwards. And as far as this new with Mamdani, I mean, he's just taken a key out of the playbook of the communists and the socialists, and that's what they did. They divide the classes, and if they can't divide the classes, they divide it by the ethnicities and the faiths and whatever they can do to get people to pit up against each other, to cause the chaos, so that they can increase their power by disrupting the system. And it seems to me that Americans have too short a memory. And one thing about the military, we have rigor. We have to earn, and we have to work hard to get where we are. You were enlisted. I was enlisted. Nobody just went up and handed us a butter bar. Am I right?
That's right.
You know?
That's right. Well, we got to take
Yes,
another break
Skippy.
when we come back. When we come back, we'll talk about the current war on crime that this administration is conducting, and we'll return back to that subject of the National Guard and deportations and those kind of things with congressional candidate, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Mike Pierce.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home, went to bed.
Also because the military serves a role to protect Americans, not to be used against Americans.
Exactly. You keep saying used against Americans. What kind of Americans do you mean? The ones that are murdering us, carjacking us, raping us, terrorizing our cities? I mean, you're saying like he's creating an actual war against American citizens when what he's actually creating is a war against criminals and, by the way, illegal aliens who they are rounding up by the bucket load in Washington.
I want to let Ellie speak, but I mean, look, I'm not saying he's creating a war against American citizens, but I also think that, first of all, when you have, large amounts of armed military personnel on the streets, they're going to encounter a lot of Americans who've done nothing wrong. And those Americans have rights, as do the Americans who have done things wrong, just to be clear. But Americans who have done nothing wrong will get caught up and have gotten caught up in this.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. And we live in a chaotic America, much of our own doing because of who we keep voting for. And that applies to both sides of the aisle, folks. I'm no fan of the establishment Republicans who voted to have open borders quite frequently over the last 20 to 30 years. And my guest today is congressional candidate in the Illinois 11th District, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, PhD, and author Mike Pierce. Mike, the war on crime. I mean, there's a couple of different things. You mentioned the National Guard not being used to protect those students, and I think you're right. I hadn't really thought about that, and I wonder why they weren't used to protect those students, just like we've used the National Guard to protect students before in our country. And there's a precedent for that. And there's a precedent for what President Trump's doing to send the National Guard in to protect federal facilities that are under attack by some of these crazy people on the left and even illegals now are in on this effort, and also sending the National Guard in to help local authorities clean up some crime and take some pressure off of their manpower woes and funding woes and those kind of things. I don't have a problem with it as long as it's done for the right reasons and the right way and legally.
Yeah, I mean, number one, with regards to whether the National Guard should have even been called up in the first place, if the local authorities are not able to do the job that's required. If you just take a look at Chicago, the crime rate has been, it's been higher. Just because they saw improvements doesn't mean that it's got the most murders per capita in the United States, much more than LA or New York, even though we're not the highest metropolitan area. But the murders were happening every week, and you have double digits. What's going on? So there's obviously a problem. As far as them going down there and being supportive to the local authorities and rounding up a lot of the illegal aliens, he's followed the law. They're not out there trying to intimidate people. They're doing their job, and then you've got the ICE people are doing their job, and there's a reason for that. And yeah, a lot of people are brought in a dragnet. Maybe they have not committed crimes in the U.S. yet. Number one, about 30% of them have committed crimes in the U.S. So 30% out of that group, and we don't know if they've committed murders. But if you don't, you've got to pick them up somehow. I mean, last weekend we had another couple that was killed by an illegal alien. So my question is, what's the acceptable percentage? Ask a Democrat this: what's the acceptable percentage of murdered people in our state for you? Before we pick up and start asking questions about people who've come here with no vetting. We don't know where they've come from. We don't know if they're terrorists. We don't know their background. At a time when trafficking of persons is at an all-time high, when drug inflow is at an all-time high, when there's terrorists from all over the world coming in here at an all-time high. Trump needed to do those because the situation had gotten to such a point. And if they're unhappy about it, then they shouldn't have opened up the floodgates like they did back in 2021.
Yeah, what do you hear from folks in your district when you're out talking to them? I was up in New Jersey over the last week, stumping in the governor's race, and several legal immigrants came up to me, one Hispanic and one Asian, and said, "Hey, sir, when you're talking about the things they disagree with us on, make sure you mention that us legal immigrants are the most furious and angry people at the Democrats for letting these tens of millions of illegals come here and take our tax dollars, and that they have already committed a crime, whether they've committed a violent crime or not, it doesn't matter. They've still committed a crime just by coming here illegally."
You're absolutely right. I mean, first of all, the process for anybody who's just trying to do things the right and legal way, just to be coming to visit, it is crazy. It's super complicated. They're always changing the regulations and dates. And, I can use my own personal situation because, my wife's German. And for her and my daughter to go, as we go back and forth between the passport process, it's crazy. Now, imagine if somebody went through that for years and years and years, and then 10 million people just suddenly just show up and push them back in line after they've arrived and they're doing all the right things, and all this, and they're paying taxes, and then millions of people just shown up and they put them back in line. How would anybody feel about that? Of course they're furious. And it gives, if people would think about it, it affects every single person in their community, because it's also giving them a bad name, because other people aren't going to be, taking as much time and thinking about it, and they may not fully understand their situation or their differences. But when we hear the Democrats talk about it, they're always talking about, oh, we have a problem with brown or dark people. That's not the problem. It's not about people's color. It's about the culture. It's about following the rules. America would not stand if you're at Disney World and suddenly 500 people just showed up and got in front of you at the Space Mountain line. Nobody would take that. You'd have a riot. Same thing if you're at the line when you come in the United States, and the Europeans do this, they just all kind of shove in together. No, Americans like things in a line. They support the underdog. They're all for the American dream, and all of us are immigrants at some point, right? But we want is for people to do it the right way. We're a nation of laws. Why is that so complicated to understand?
Yeah, yeah. And then the other thing on top of this with this mass illegal immigration and even mass legal immigration, and I want to get your thoughts on that. But when you look at Mr. Mondami's, the people that voted for him, the folks that voted for him, 83% of them had less than 5 years in the nation. So if you're bringing in these large masses over a short period of time, and you're not insisting that they have a desire and show that desire through their actions to assimilate as Americans, look, it doesn't matter what country you're from, as long as you come here to assimilate as Americans. And I'll give you an example. I have some good friends that still are of the Muslim faith, but they're not Islamist. Islamism is the tyrannical ideology that you see being imposed on the populations in places like Iran and other of these theocracies. Regular Muslims, if they want to come here and be Americans, they want to be part of American society. They're not going to insist on Sharia law. They want to follow the Constitution. Sharia law is antithetical to the Constitution because they know that they want to be in a place where their kids can prosper and practice their belief system without fear, but also know that nobody is going to try to push their own belief system on them in a violent, an aggressive physical way and make them do it through force of law or anything like that. That's assimilation while maintaining your background and your faith as you see fit. Not what we see with this, like Mandami. I mean, there's videos all over the place of the guy, even in his acceptance speech, that we're here, we're immigrants, and we're going to push back against everything America stands for, and we're going to fight to destroy it. That is not what is supposed to happen with immigrants in America. It's the opposite of what's supposed to happen, and that's potentially could destroy this country, couldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's not the right attitude to have. And first of all, how about an attitude of gratitude, being so thankful to be in a country like ours, where people can practice their faith, where different sects of the Muslim faith, for example, can be here and they can freely practice. Because if you're a Sunni in Iran, you're going to get a lot of pushback. If you're a Shia in Jordan, for example, you're going to get pushback. So if you're an Alawite in certain areas, you're going to get, they're going to hound you in Syria. That's why they held on to power so long, because they were a minority amongst that group. So, the fact that we offer so much to the world, they come here, and then it's repugnant that they're going to go and try and talk about transformational change of our country into something that resembles what they just fled from. And they're doing this. They're just demagogues. They're out there trying to get themselves increase their power, but they're doing it at the expense of everybody in the cities, for example, New York, because people who have the money, the conservative people and other people who are just kind of on the sidelines, they're not going to sit there and either let their rights be taken away or their taxes be pushed to the roof. They're going to leave. And it's just going to create an echo chamber of bitterness. And it won't help the lives of the people who bought into this false dream. And at the same time, it's going to make it much more difficult. And in the long run, the people who have the power, once things shift back, that's how you get a real authoritarianism, and you'll get a clampdown on people's liberties. So what they're doing is they're actually hurting their causes, whether it's the gays supporting, Palestine, or whether it's the women supporting the Islamist Wahhabist movement. I mean, it's just, it's amazing to me that people aren't even realizing who they're supporting and what they're all about. And somebody needs to educate people, and that's not happening. And we're trying to do it. I'm trying to do it. I think I'm a fair and, common sense person. I don't need to swear to talk to people. But I think that we do need to, outline and be proud of our American values and make sure people understand what those values are.
Yeah, because that's how we achieve prosperity and how we achieve greatness and maintain greatness is understanding the American values as immigrants have always come to this country. And, you know, the difference between the immigrants in New York City today, you know, Mondami is fond of saying the city was built by immigrants. Yes, it was. But those immigrants worked very hard to become Americans because they knew where they came from wasn't what America is. And That's why they were here. The opposite is happening today, and it's very concerning. I will be interested to see over the next couple of years to see how this plays out. It could go one of two ways. I think he gets all his people in place, and we've seen the Democratic Socialists of America demands on him. There's like 12 of them that hit just before I came on air, and every single one of them is about divesting in any company that's Jewish that supports Israel, or the any nonprofits that support Israel, and those kinds of things. And that's just not what America is all about. What America is all about is freedom and prosperity, and the ability to believe what you believe without hurting other people, and to go out and work as hard as you can and become even president of the United States if you want to. I mean, that's what we were raised on, and that's what we need people to understand so that they embrace our values instead of try to tear them down, burn them up, and go with the despot governments and tyrannical ideologies that they were running away from. Well, we got to take one last break here. When we come back, I want to talk about the economy, because I think this New York City thing has some bearing on what the future economy of the entire United States and maybe even large parts of the world will look like if it goes south on us. We'll be right back with Mike Pierce.
Hey.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Dana.
Okay.
The Democrats had a great night. I want to sugarcoat it a little bit, though. These were all blue states. Trump didn't campaign there. He didn't spend money there. And the candidates Republicans ran were not very good.
Full stop.
With that said, the economy is still the number one issue. And Trump has done a very good job digging us out of the Bidenomics hole. Inflation's down to 3%, gas prices are down, and wages are up. But there are still people struggling out there. So he needs to pivot from the commander-in-chief thing to the kitchen table guy. And he needs to do it fast. I understand why he went overseas in the beginning. You got to bring all this money into the country. You got to do these trade deals. It's going to take a little time for those things to develop. But in the meantime, he's got a warp speed power plants going back online. He's got a warp speed housing construction, apartments. You can't even build an apartment in this city because they want less apartments, because that way the rent goes up and the real estate guys get rich. You also have to bring these insurance executives to Washington, D.C. and do something about the price of insurance. I don't know what it is, but something has to be done. And then you got to bring the AI guys in and say, if you're going to AI these guys out of a job, what's next? I don't know the answer to that. There has to be an answer to that. But he has to now be the economy guy, and he has to do it with laser focus, or you could see problems in the midterms.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. Yes, we do live in a chaotic America. Today's Truth Thursday, and we're telling the truth. And it is about the economy, stupid. It's the economy, stupid. My guest today is Illinois 11 congressional candidate and retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Mike Pierce. Mike, what are your ideas that you're going to want to try to put in place and get passed as a congressman regarding the economy? I mean, the president is doing a good job. It takes time to get these numbers back to levels that where people can afford it. But as I said in my opening, the big deal is that young Americans under 40 are priced out of the housing market, and they really do want to get married, have babies, and buy a house. So that, I mean, that is the epitome of the American dream. And on one income, by the way, I think that's a good thing to strive for. I was in a household when I was a boy and a brother of three, four other kids. And my mom was there up until we were teenagers. She didn't start working. So we knew what it was like in those days and still know what it was like in those days to have a parent in the home while we were growing up in those formative years. And I think all of those things are doable, but we're not getting there fast enough. And the Gen Z's getting older and they're very frustrated.
Yeah, I agree with you. Number one is going to be engagement, direct engagement with manufacturers and people who produce and have money. There's a couple of things going on here. Number one, we've got people who are leaving Illinois to move their plants, not overseas, but to different states. You got Johnsonville Brats closed the plant down in Maness, Illinois, just south of my district, and they're moving up to Wisconsin. Well, believe me, they sell plenty of bratwurst in Chicago still. So my question to them is, how many millions of dollars worth of bratwurst are you selling here, and why can't we find a way for you and have your plant and have it profitable? The same thing with Caterpillar or John Deere leaving Illinois, where there's plenty of farmers. The other thing has to do with the manufacturing of cars and automobiles, like the Subaru Outback. Subaru's got a plant going over there in Indiana. So really, Indiana has more infrastructure, better infrastructure than Illinois. So it's a combination of people working at the state level and at the federal level and contacting these manufacturers and working with them directly and just bringing people to the table. We have a great market here in Illinois, millions of people. It's one of the best markets in the country. You can't tell me that they can't find profitability. Even now, I mean, they're trying to, that maybe the state has too many taxes, and so that needs to be addressed. But that's the first thing I'm going to do. The second thing is that our small businesses, there's a lot of things that we can inspire and help people get their small businesses started. Small business is one of the key things that came out of World War II after the veterans came back. Everybody talks about the GI Bill, but there's also a lot of support with the Small Business Administration. So we need to beef that up. And if you have more small businesses going, then you would have more of an opportunity for people to practice their entrepreneurship. But it's got to be done in such a way that they can make it work and that there's a market, but there's also, it's an affordable thing. So it has to do with what are the price of the interest. For example, if we can give student loans to somebody who goes to college, up to $50,000 or $100,000, and they have no clue of what they're going to do, why can't we have something like that for people who have got a great idea? They get the vocational training, and then they go on and they can start a business. So we need to open up that aperture so people can become business people and contractors. And when you do that, more small businesses, we're going to be the backbone of a resurgence. And with that resurgence comes a tax base. And with that tax base, it distributes the load. And that means everybody's taxes don't have to continually be raised. So the other thing is talking about fiscal responsibility of the programs that are in place so that we're actually having the people who need the disability benefits or who need the SNAP benefits or other benefits that they actually are getting them. My brother's disabled, but guess what? He's getting Social Security that my parents had. So he's on basically a subsistence level. So yet we've got people who come in here, just showed up, and they get free housing and they got enough for their family, entire family. And yet my brother is getting less than he even got in the year 2000 for a housing allowance. So, I mean, thankfully we as a family step up to provide. But those are ways that we can fix that. So tighten up the belt, engagement with industry, open up the aperture for small businesses, and really focus on bringing prices down. And that's where the government says, okay, enough of the taxation. Last week or 2 weeks ago, Kane County, Illinois, they just voted for 5 to 8 cent a gas tax per gallon. Now think about it. Things are already hard enough, and they don't drive around in their fancy electric cars. So the people it's hurting all your kitchen table issue people. They just heard them. And at the same time, they added a 1% grocery tax that the state had repealed. So, I mean, it's these governments at the local level as well. They've got to step up to the plate and stop overtaxing people. And don't even get us started on property taxes.
Well, go Ron DeSantis. Every governor should be taking a look at his move to eliminate property taxes as a model to go on. I totally agree with that. You brought up SNAP and welfare and those kind of things, and recent numbers just this last week from CIS show that the majority of people on welfare and the SNAP program are non-citizen households. What ideas will you bring to legal immigration policy to get that under control? Because I'm of the opinion now, and this is a change in my position since the Biden administration brought these 20 million more people in. I'm of the opinion now that we ought to pause legal immigration until we get this illegal situation sorted out, because you're talking about upwards of 50 million people in this country that are not citizens. And you brought your brother up. I mean, Americans ought to be getting that subsistence, not people that aren't citizens of the United States. We shouldn't be allowing them to come here if they need subsistence.
Think about this. Think about this. You know, you got somebody whose ancestors go all the way back to Daniel Boone. He's been living here. I got a cousin, right? And he's on a very bad way. He couldn't even get his Social Security started because he wasn't old enough. And there's millions of people out there like him. They were already poor before the government flooded the country with 20 million immigrants. 20 million, right? And so all of a sudden, every one of those people have even less that they can go with. We've got to put it. I believe we need to be a place where people who are being persecuted can flee. If people have skills and they want to come to the United States and be a part of our family, that's great. But right now, the system has been flooded. It's crashed the system. How often do we have to what part of $39 trillion don't people understand? And why is that? It's grown exponentially in the last several years. Eventually you run out of other people's money. That's what Margaret Thatcher said. This whole idea that we'll just take from everybody who's worked there. Families have worked for generations to acquire something, to be able to be the first person in their family, maybe who went to college, or the first person to actually own a house. And now they're going to overtax them so they can't, or they're going to make some senior citizen sell their home because they can't afford the increases in the taxes and the health care that they have to pay for because it's so expensive, because there's not enough of it, because so many immigrants are here. We gotta let the system cool. You're gonna break the complete machine unless you settle it down and put things more orderly. Trump's closed the border, and that's a good start. But there's a lot of people in here who still don't belong here, and they need to fess up. And we need to get people who have been here, who may have been brought in through dubious ways. We need to take a look at that too. We need to make sure that these people who have worked hard for generations, trying to lift themselves from poverty. If you're from the Deep South, you know what I'm talking about. If you're from Appalachia, you know what I'm talking about. Nobody handed you, a fine condo. You had to work and scratch your way to the top, and so many people did. And they're just being lumped into the sum of a few people who are billionaires. But the billionaires have tax shelters. Joe and Molly Six-Pack don't. Their home is their castle, and it's being threatened. And so we need to do something about that. We need to step up and fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got a couple minutes left here. I want to give you a chance to talk about what you want to do for veterans. The president's main veterans legislation, the Access Act, is out there right now. We're trying to get it passed by November 11th. Do you support the president's approach to the Veterans Affairs Department? And how will you try to help that mission?
I support the approach. I think we need to, we need to clean up the VA. That's one of the problems that's been going on for years. You heard a lot of cases of it, but the VA is a great institution, and we just need to make it better. I mean, Doug Collins, out there doing the very best that he can, and I'm very grateful to the VA. I had both my knees replaced last year, so they gave you some great care. Unfortunately, the VA has become the catch-all for a lot of things where people are not taken care of and providing opportunities for veterans and the rest of our society. So it, like the others, is kind of becoming crashed. Then there's another thing about the resentment some people have because they never served our country. And they're saying, oh, well, veterans get a lot of benefits. Are you kidding me? Are you absolutely kidding me? They're veterans who've written a blank check to their country for 20 years or 30 years or whatever, or even 2 years. So a country can go on a war of convenience and, well, we'll just go with we'll go to war with the army we have instead of the army we want. Iraq wasn't Pearl Harbor as far as I recall. So, the government is the country, and the country voted the government in. And so when veterans are deployed, we have to honor their service and sacrifice. And that goes on for them, and even if their kids are impacted by it, because only 1% of Americans, that's the 1% they don't talk about. So what I would do as when I would get into office is certainly I would continue to stand. There's a lot of new resolutions that were drafted by the American Legion. I'm a life member of the Legion and the VFW. And so these resolutions are put together every year to improve the quality of life for veterans and their families. So I will be the first in line to support the veterans and their families, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that they don't have to wait till such a drastic thing. Last thing, my dad was a World War II vet. He died in a very sad way, and the only way he could get the VA, the VA to do anything for him was after he went down and had his leg run over by a train there in West Virginia. So is that really where we want our veterans to live by? And how many veterans have we read about who committed suicide because they weren't getting enough help? 22 a day means something. It means something because those are people who gave themselves to this country, and they said, "Oh, well, you haven't suffered enough, or you're not broke enough." Really? Tell that to the 22 a day who killed themselves.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, Mike, thank you very much for coming on today and sharing your story and talking about your campaign and the current issues of the day here in the United States of America. God bless you. Thank you for stepping up to serve again. 10 seconds, tell folks where to find you so they can donate.
Sure. It's voteforpierce.com. That's the internet site. I also have a Facebook site, Lieutenant Colonel Retired, or LTC RET, Michael Pierce for Congress. And we've also on TikTok and
I'll tell you one little quick story. We had a Worldview Weekend client who lived in California, lost their house. Very wealthy guy. He didn't use Bitcoin. He came over here, drove to Arizona with $286,000 worth of his gold because he had no money and no house available. His bank was shut down because he couldn't have access to his bank account.
Was this during the fire? Was this during the fires?
During the fire. Didn't have his driver's license. He lost it. The state wouldn't give him a new license because he had no active mailing address. Real mess. So he came to Arizona to buy a house. He's moving everything over. He said, the only thing I got in my possession that I can get liquid with right now is my gold. I gave him a check for $286,000, and guess what? I didn't need his social, his driver's license. Sort of smiled, and I said, I know you and Brandon talked about how this worked, but boy, this is great. I feel good. I got my money. Nobody bothered me, and I'm protected, and it's private.
Just simply go to worldviewgold.com, fill out the form, worldviewgold.com. Tonight on the Worldview Report, Democrats score big wins on election night, sending a socialist and an Islamist to the mayor's office in America's largest city, while picking up governorships in New Jersey and Virginia. President Trump has changed his mind about releasing federal funds for food stamps. Germany tells Syrian refugees to go home. The FDA announces a crackdown on fluoride tablets, saying they are making kids sick. And the government shutdown is causing chaos at U.S. airports. And the Trump administration steps up federal use of facial recognition as a form of identifying both non-citizens and citizens. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, From national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family. Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brannon Howse.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. Leading off tonight, the capital of American capitalism, as it's called, New York City, has just elected itself the first open socialist and Islamic mayor. He has pledged to punish the wealthy, crack down on landlords, freeze rents, open city-run grocery stores, make public transit free, and tackle the city's crime through, quote, mental health services, end quote, whatever that really means, I don't know. Zohran Mamdani, he will also be the city's first Muslim mayor. New York City's newly elected mayor has repeatedly expressed hostility toward Israel, while also defending Hamas's actions. He has also refused multiple times to condemn the slogan, globalize the Intifada. That as he prepares to take over a city with a 12% Jewish population, one of the largest in the world. It would be wise, of course, to exercise caution and closely monitor how he governs, and we will. While his socialist agenda may be toned down as he assumes office and discovers the complexities of government, even diluted versions of his policies, well, they could serve to normalize and popularize socialism all across the rest of the country. His victory, it will send a clear signal to the Democratic establishment. Their days of merely flirting with socialism are over. It's fully now embracing the socialist cause, with 66% of Democrats supporting socialism over capitalism. That's according to Gallup polls. A failed ideology discredited by history through figures like Stalin, Mao, and others has indeed found a foothold in one of the largest economic centers in the United States. And no one is sure exactly what that will mean for the future. But I promise you this, we're going to be tracking it very closely. Also decided on Tuesday night was a key race for Attorney General in Virginia. Controversial Democrat by the name of Jay Jones. He won that race and will be the next AG of Virginia. Jones managed to beat incumbent Republican AG Jason Myris. Jones won despite those text messages, remember those, in which he said he'd like to shoot Republican Todd Gilbert and called Gilbert's young sons little fascists and wished those boys would die in their mother's arms in order to get Gilbert to move on policy like gun control? Well, even that was not enough to turn Virginia voters against making Jones their state's top law enforcement officer. Jones also performed questionable community service after being convicted of reckless driving. Instead of actual community service, Jones worked for his own campaign to fulfill the sentence handed down by the courts. The win, it comes despite an NBC exit poll that said most voters found Jones's comments either concerning or disqualifying. Democrat Abigail Spanberger and Gonzalo Hamshimi, they were both elected as governor and lieutenant governor, marking a trifecta for Democrats in Virginia. And then in Minneapolis, Mayor Jacob Frey, he took the lead with 41.8% of the vote, with 98% of the votes counted. That's according to the Associated Press. And as we come on the air tonight, it is confirmed the mayor will hold off his socialist, Marxist, Islamic challenger there in that race. Democrats also won a key gubernatorial race in New Jersey with liberal state representative Mickey Sherrill beating out Republican Jack Ciattarelli, who came close to unseating incumbent Democrat Phil Murphy just a few years ago. Ciattarelli, he garnered some surprising endorsements from local Democrats, unions, and even Jewish groups. But in deep blue New Jersey, it was not enough. Not enough to get him over the hump. Sherrill was not the strongest candidate, but apparently that's not needed. All she had to do was make her entire candidacy about you-know-who, Donald Trump. And that was enough to carry her to a victory in that blue state. The death toll in a catastrophic airplane crash that sent a United Parcels Service aircraft into a ball of flames has risen to 9 as of Wednesday. as authorities continue searching for survivors and investigating the cause. The UPS cargo plane was departing for Honolulu from the Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport when it crashed at about 5:15 p.m. local time on Tuesday. Video of the crash showed flames of one of the plane's wings and a huge fireball erupting as the aircraft hit the ground. Here's the footage of the devastating crash. Three crew members aboard the plane were killed in the crash, according to authorities. Louisville Mayor's Craig Greenberg, he said at a late-night news conference that 4 fatalities were confirmed on the ground and 11 other people were injured and had to be taken to local hospitals. 2 others were found deceased by first responders at the scene. That's according to Greenberg and Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. That's what they said on Wednesday. Search and rescue was still underway on Wednesday morning, and at least 16 families at a reunification center have loved ones unaccounted for. Beshear said that fact. The death toll, well, it is expected, sadly, to grow. That's what he added. And on Tuesday night, here's what he said, quote, anybody who has seen the images and the video know how violent this crash is. And there are a lot of families that are going to be waiting and wondering for a period of time, end quote. Our prayers go out to those families. President Trump has declared Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP benefits, will not be distributed until Democrats agree to end their federal government shutdown. Trump made the announcement after a coalition of plaintiffs urged a federal judge to intervene. In a post on Truth Social, President Trump wrote, quote, benefits for participants in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, will be given only when the radical left Democrats open up government, which they can easily do, and not before, end quote. The statement followed a filing by Trump administration officials in a Rhode Island federal court indicating plans to use $4.6 billion in contingency funds to partially cover November SNAP payments. Officials told U.S. District Judge John McConnell Jr. that the Department of Agriculture would work with states to distribute 50% of normal benefits to the program's 42 million participants. At first, Trump said he would release the funds at the 50% level. On Tuesday, he changed his mind. USDA officials said that states, well, they're going to need to recode their eligibility systems to process the reduced payments, warning the changes could take weeks or months to implement. Judge McConnell, he scheduled a hearing for November 6th and ordered the government to respond to the motion by the end of today, Wednesday, November 5th. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has told Syrian refugees to go home or face deportation from Germany, as he insisted that the war-torn Middle Eastern state was safe for them to return. The chancellor suggested that all Syrian citizens without German passports or residence permits should return to help rebuild their country. Speaking on Monday night, the center-right Christian Democrats leader, he said this, quote, the Syrian civil war is over. There's absolutely no reason to claim asylum in Germany anymore. And we can therefore begin with repatriations, end quote. He claimed that a very large portion of Syrians wish to return home. And he added that, quote, we can, of course, in the future, deport those in Germany who refuse to return, end quote. Merz, he was publicly rebuking Joanne Wadelpool, his foreign minister, who suggested during a recent trip to Syria that the country was still unfit for people to return to as a result of intense bombing during the civil war. Germany welcomed about 1 million Syrians at the height of the 2015 refugee crisis, and approximately 1.3 million who are currently living in the country, including 250,000 who were born there. While some Syrians have fully integrated into German society, a majority, well, they do not have residence permits. And instead, they continue to live under refugee status. At the end of 2023, about 712,000 Syrians living in Germany were still classified as asylum seekers. Merz, he said that Germany would be willing to help Syrians rebuild their country. But he suggested a condition of this would be an increase in the numbers returning home. He said, quote, "We know that a very large portion of Syrians want to return. We will encourage this, and we will also help the country to rebuild it quickly," end quote. We'll be right back after this break. Do you appreciate all the free programming we produce here at Worldview Tube? Well, if you do, we need your partnership now. If you're already supporting us, thank you. If you're not, would you please consider doing so? We have to have a big November and December end of the year giving. Please go here right now to this website, worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. You can give through credit card. You can give through PayPal. You'll find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. You'll also find our phone number. Simply use that phone number by leaving a voicemail for Melissa or texting her, and my wife will get back with you and help you make your contribution over the phone. We send out tax receipts with our EIN number, well, the first week of February of each year. We, again, have to have a very big November and December as we get ready for pushing out more Christian Worldview programming for 2026. So thank you for going now to worldviewfoundation.com. That's worldviewfoundation.com. Welcome back from the break, and thank you for joining us tonight and every night. And please do not forget about us in your end of the year giving. Vital, we have a very big November and December for our foundation as we get ready to push out lots and lots of free Christian Worldview programming for 2026. So please do not forget about us in your end of the year giving. Would you please consider going even now to worldviewfoundation.com and setting up an automatic monthly contribution? Hey, life gets busy, you get busy, and many people actually will write to us and say, I am so sorry, I forgot, I got so busy. Well, guess what? Our bills, they just somehow, the bill collectors, they never forget to come knocking, right? So we need you to be faithful every month in your giving if you can. Hey, look, never think $5, $10 a month isn't important. It all adds up. Please consider setting up an automatic contribution right now at worldviewfoundation.com. Thank you for that. Worldviewfoundation.com. Thank you to those of you that are supporting us already. Thank you. If you prefer to support us through the mail, however, you will find our mailing address at worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Disneyland is not such a happy place of late. Disneyland Resort has laid off 100 of its employees as ticket prices for the parks hit what we're told is an all-time high. Workers from all different teams in Anaheim, California, they were let go at the end of last month as the company works on, well, recalibrating the organization. The Disney spokesman said, quote, "With our business in a period of steady, sustained operation, we are recalibrating our organization to ensure we continue to deliver exceptional experiences for our guests while positioning Disneyland Resort for the future. As part of this, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate a limited number of salaried positions," end quote. Disney added that they had overhired when parks reopened as the COVID-19 pandemic slowed down. Its theme parks, well, they serve as a key economic driver for the Burbank-based media and entertainment giant. In the past year, the company's divisions, that includes, by the way, theme parks, cruise lines, and all kinds of resorts and spas in Hawaii, well, it accounted for nearly 60% of Disney's total operating income. In other news, the LA Times reports that the government shutdown is beginning to cause more sustained delays at airports across the country due to a shortage in air traffic controllers that could, in fact, get worse as the busy holiday travel season approaches. airport interruptions have been largely sporadic, but this weekend was the worst for air traffic control staffing since the shutdown began last month. The Federal Aviation Administration reported on Friday that a surge in call-outs among air traffic controllers had left at least half of the 30 busiest airports across the country understaffed, leading to widespread delays. Two of Southern California's busiest airports, Los Angeles International Airport and San Diego International Airport, well, they experienced average flight delays of at least an hour. That was on Sunday. And it might be just, of course, the beginning as the government shutdown heads into its second month. At the same time, travelers preparing to fly to spend time with loved ones around the Thanksgiving period. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said in an interview on CBS Face the Nation that it's only going to get worse. Nearly 13,000 air traffic controllers have been working without pay for weeks, resulting in high levels of fatigue and stress among staff. That's, of course, tasked with keeping the skies safe while wrestling with personal financial pressures. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has announced a nationwide crackdown on unapproved and potentially risky fluoride tablets. They're being sold for children, and they're warning that many have been in circulation for decades without proper review or authorization. In a notice issued to manufacturers, the agency told companies selling the, fluoride drugs that it plans to remove unapproved products from the market. The regulators wrote, quote, "We are providing this notice to allow your company time to assess your products and take appropriate corrective actions," end quote. According to new FDA analysis, ingestible fluoride pills and drops that are prescribed in order to supposedly prevent cavities, well, they have been used in the U.S. since the 1940s, but they were never formally approved. While the analysis found the products may help reduce tooth decay and permanent teeth, it also determined that there is no proven benefit for younger children. The agency also highlighted several health risks, including tooth discoloration and potential harm to gut microbiome. FDA stated, quote, "Overall, out of an abundance of caution, it would be prudent to limit use of ingestible fluoride drug products to children age 3 years and older who are at high risk of tooth decay," end quote. That includes children with a history of cavities or limited access to fluoridated water. That's what the agency said. The move, it comes as part of President Trump's Make America Healthy Again initiative, which seeks to reevaluate longstanding public health practices. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who oversees the FDA, said, quote, "It's scary that these products have been used for decades without approval. Today's action raises public awareness, informs medical professionals, and builds on President Trump's commitment to make our children healthy again." Well, now it is time for our nightly Worldview Report commentary. Biometric Update reports that the Trump administration quietly erased a Department of Homeland Security policy on facial recognition from its public website, while deepening its embrace of the controversial technology, including a multi-million-dollar contract with Clearview AI. That's a company legally barred from selling its software to law enforcement agencies in the state of Illinois. The ban stems from a landmark settlement under Illinois' Biometric Information Privacy Act, a 2008 law that requires informed consent for the collection of biometric identifiers such as fingerprints or facial scans. The American Civil Liberties Union and other advocacy groups, they sued Clearview AI back in 2020, arguing that its massive database of photographs, scraped, by the way, from social media platforms, violated the privacy rights of residents. The resulting settlement, it blocked most businesses and state or local enforcement agencies in that state of Illinois from using the technology, but did not block federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Meanwhile, ICE, they have deployed a smartphone tool called Mobile Fortify, which lets agents scan a person's face or fingerprints during street encounters, all to verify identity and immigration status. Internal ICE documents state that persons photographed are not given an opportunity to decline collection, even if they are U.S. citizens. Procurement records show ICE issued a purchase order to Clearview in September of 2024 for forensic software services with a ceiling of about $1.1 million. A year later, which is this past September 5th, agency was awarded a follow-on contract with an initial obligation of $3.75 million toward a total value reported at $9.2 million. That award, it coincided with ICE's Midway Blitz. That's their large-scale immigration enforcement operation across the Chicago area, and it continues to this day. Independent reporting found that ICE now holds, quote, at least $3.6 million worth of contracts, end quote, with Clearview to provide software capable of matching names, social media profiles, and other personal identifiers. Federal contract databases also list Clearview agreements with the FBI, the U.S. Army, and the Marshal Services, along with Customs and Border Protection. That does it for this edition of the Worldview Report. As always, thank you for tuning in and supporting the broadcast at worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Till next time, I'm Brandon House. May God save America. Take care. We have a big announcement, folks, something we've been waiting on for several months, and it's now here. It's called Bella Melt. You were on it for just 1 week when you lost 3 pounds. So in the first week, you lost 3 pounds on this, right?
That is correct.
Your GLP-1 is a natural hormone that's in every single one of our bodies. And your GLP-1 lets you know if you're full. It's a satiety hormone. So when your GLP is working properly, it does help suppress your appetite as well as reduce those cravings. It's a sugar-free fast melt caramel. So what it's going to do best is it's going to reduce your sugar cravings or any other cravings you have in your body. It's going to suppress that appetite. But where Melissa got the most benefit, I think, over the last week was the L-carnitine. The L-carnitine tells your mitochondria, this is where you make, we've talked about it before, this is where you produce energy in your cells. It actually tells those mitochondria to burn fat for fuel. We're noticing other people losing up to 7 pounds in the first week. 4 pounds has been about the average. As you lose weight and as you take these Bella Melts, it's going to help lower that blood sugar in your body as well.
All the information is there. MelissaHouseBG.com, MelissaHouseBG.com. Just now introducing for the first time Bella Melt with GLP-1 Fast Action. July 6, 2005. This is Tom Harper. Man figures plankton stopped his rare cancer. We got more of a response from this from our viewers than anything else you and I have ever discussed.
Tom Harper, 20 years ago, he had mesothelioma, deadly lung cancer, was given weeks to live, and he just intuitively started to eat the phytoplankton out of his fish tanks because he fed the phytoplankton to his shellfish. He was a shellfish farmer. And when he went in for the surgery, the surgeon came out of the operating room and told his family, I have not ever seen anything like it. The cancer is benign, and Tom Harper lived for years. He retired in Hawaii. We're not making any claim.
Here he is in his own words.
Started on a daily routine of just taking a bit of paste, putting it in my mouth, and wash it down with a drink of water. Within about 10 to 15 days, here I am, less pain in my back. I knew that something was going on, so I just kept eating half a teaspoon of this paste a day. I was booked to go for surgery in Victoria where they were going to do what they call a talc treatment. They went in there to have a look, saw something they never seen before, took 11 sites, sent them away for biopsy. I got the news back. Everything was benign. They just did not know what to make of it. Everything was absolutely clean. And I've tried dieting all my life because I'm a diabetic. If it's a coincidence or not, I don't know. My blood sugar started dropping. My weight started falling off. Here I am, no longer requiring insulin, and I was taking 88 units a day of insulin. I can eat just about what I want in moderation, and I have no elevated sugar levels, and I feel fabulous.
People, you hear the word cancer and they want you to be instilled with fear. Cancer is nothing but a profound failure of the immune system. And what happened with Tom Harper is the phytoplankton is microscopic. It's God's microscopic food. And the Gadatiana is the most nutritionally comprehensive strain phytoplankton in the world. David Hunter studied phytoplankton for 20 years because he worked for Tom Harper and he was there in person and witnessed Tom's recovery. It's about getting pure nutrition inside your cells. And what happens, your body balances again or goes back to homeostasis. And when your body is pH balanced or in homeostasis, disease can't grow. It is literally microscopic, pure single cell plant food with protein and omega-3 fatty acids, omega-6 fatty acids, with amino acids and vitamins and minerals. 1 scoop a day. There's 90 billion plant cells in here just for everyday nutrition and energy and, cognitive support, because this is God's pure nutrition.
Go to melissahousegpa.com today. Discover the science and learn more about the wonderful benefits of Gadatana phytoplankton. That's melissahousegpa.com. melissahousegpa.com.
All right, welcome to Code Blue. This is Dr. John and Brooke. It is November the 5th, 2025. It's hard to believe it's already November. This year 2025 is going by quickly. So we have, we're going to talk about this report that the McCullough Foundation has put out, and it's the what's causing autism. And this is, it's been it's going around social media, being viewed hundreds of thousands of times. And so with that, Brooke, you want to talk a little bit about it, then we're going to run the video.
Yes. When the other day when we all watched as Kennedy and the others came out and talked about Tylenol being a key component, it felt a little unsatisfying. It may be that Tylenol plays a role, but what we all have come to believe over the course of the last, 5 or 6 years, just looking into this deeply, is that there is most definitely a connection between the ramped up amount of injections that a little baby receives early. And we've known this, we've seen this, and it just did not feel right. It, like I said, felt completely unsatisfying. I'm not saying that the report that they came out with is not true. I'm just saying I don't feel like that's the biggest picture or the biggest part of the picture. And so Dr. McCullough, as he always does, clear thinking, has been looking at this. And he and his colleagues have done the work and they've compiled the studies. And I'm so very grateful for their diligence. They have just been so persevering and, pushing the truth out there, because every mother and father that hears the truth, that's a child that could be saved from lifelong terrible consequences. On the terrible side, death, of course, and severe problems like autism, but just their immune system being attacked and being left susceptible to so many autoimmune problems and just overall health issues. So I'm very grateful for the McCullough Foundation to have compiled the study, and he's just shown himself to be stalwart in the truth and amazing perseverance to just stick with it like he has. I'm so very grateful.
All right, with that, Caleb, I'm sorry, Logan, can we roll that this video we have with Dr. McCullough?
Welcome back, everybody. Autism spectrum disorder is now estimated to affect more than 1 in 31 children in the United States. And one of the biggest goals of the MAHA movement is curbing that number. Now, one foundation fighting to help these kids is the McCullough Foundation. And joining us now to talk about all of that and more, he's world-renowned doctor and chief scientific officer at the Wellness Company. He's also the author of the new book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, an absolute must-read. Dr. Peter McCullough, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, sir, this landmark study by the McCullough Foundation, tell us what you found.
You know, this is the first major evidence-based update since the 2004 Institute of Medicine report on the topic of childhood vaccinations and autism. 82% of information in the McCullough report is new information since 2004. That's the first point. And, you know, there's no single cause of autism, but there are risk factors. We did find that the largest and most dominant and also modifiable risk factor is routine childhood vaccination in susceptible children. Now, what makes a child more susceptible would be being a premature baby, having older parents, siblings with autism, babies who have in utero exposure to drugs that moms take, and usually serious drugs like antipsychotics, anti-epileptics, antidepressives, not Tylenol, by the way. It's not, that essentially has been ruled out. What we're really left with is the fact that a big battery of vaccines has been given. It's exploded since 1986 when the manufacturers were giving liability protection. And now 12 studies show in today's world, a child born today who's healthy remains healthier with no vaccines whatsoever.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, so a lot of
Yes, I'm really appreciate the fact that he has brought this report out. Dr. John, I know you've looked a little bit closer at it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so we're talking about autism spectrum disorder here. So this is, you know, as Dr. Peter McCullough says, there's no single factor that causes autism. It's a multifactorial, you know, disorder. I mean, there's no one knows exactly for sure, but what this study has shown here, and this is, as he said, as Dr. McCullough said, this is new information that's been brought together the first time since 2004. And you know, back then, Dr. Wakefield was part of those investigations, and he's part of these studies as well. And so, as Dr. Peter McCullough said, there's 12 studies that pretty much show that your child is healthier if they don't take vaccines. And so, does that mean that if your child gets a vaccine, they're going to automatically get autism? No. But what it does, these are showing just different risk factors in general, and the possibility of increased risk of autism spectrum disorder if you get a childhood vaccine. Certainly, you know, in the study shows, certainly if you have some risk factors already, such as premature babies tend to have a higher increased risk of autism after vaccination, as well as children from older parents that get vaccinated, siblings with autism. If siblings have autism, there's going to be an increased risk of autism of the children of another sibling, especially with multiple childhood vaccines. Mothers taking drugs during pregnancy, and not just any drug, but pretty powerful drugs that we know that are risky for the fetus. For example, antipsychotics, antidepressants. You know, these are some medications that many times mothers can't stop taking during pregnancy because they have to have it in order to maintain their mental abilities. But we do know that there's risk factors in taking these medications. But and so it's further risky for these babies to get vaccinated because they could develop autism. So yeah, so we're thankful that, you know, Dr. Peter McCullough, this is you know, he is very much a research affiliated medical doctor and scientist. He has more than 650 publications in the different medical journals. And, you know, before COVID, he was a very esteemed academic physician. He taught medical students. He was, you know, really part of the inner circle, so to speak. You know, he was invited to go speak at Harvard and at different places. You know, he's a cardiologist, but also has very much knowledge base in renal disease as it affects the heart. And also, he's trained an epidemiologist, and so he just has a wide array of background and experience. And of course, during COVID, he came out and treated COVID patients. You know, he had early intervention protocols, and that, of course, got him pretty much on the blacklist. And then, of course, when the COVID vaccines rolled out, he was very skeptical of the mRNA technology. And I believe he was one of the first that came forward and said, you know, that these mRNA vaccines are not fit for human use. I know we brought him to Mississippi, and we're so honored that he you know, we reached out to him and we brought him here to Mississippi in September of 21. And, you know, if we go back to that point, this was the time when, you know, all of our so-called health officials, state health officers and people throughout the government, the American Medical Association, all the you know, medical boards and et cetera, were pushing the mRNA vaccine, not just for adults or older people, but this is when they started to push for pregnant women and then soon thereafter children. And so we brought Dr. Peter McCullough here to Mississippi. We had probably at least 400 or 500 people in a conference room, and he spoke, and he very adamantly said, you know, these vaccines are not fit for human use. And that was the mRNA COVID vaccines. And so, and of course, he was already blacklisted, but when he started really pushing against the mRNA vaccines, he was really put to the top of the list as far as being, you know, he was ousted. He was on the Baylor staff, and they pretty much they got rid of him, and they slandered him all over, and continue to do that even to today. And so now when he comes out and puts together this, you know, these studies on autism spectrum disorder for children, you know, there's no, I mean, they're continuing to do what they have done in the last number of years, and that's discredit Dr. Peter McCullough. So
that's really about all they have, is trying to discredit him. None of his critics dare face him with their accusations, because he comes with the facts, he cites the studies, he knows the data, he's a true scientist. And when they come at him, it's clear that they have a motive to protect some profit point that they have, or just, you know, just want to call him a quack, like based on no facts, no data, because his reputation and the way that he cares for us, the results speak for themselves. You know, he was right, and he looked at the very early data, and he saw the early deaths that were caused by the injection of the COVID vaccine. And he said, this should be off the market right now. And just looking, because he was so familiar with the studies that they'd done before, you have X number of deaths after this many shots, it's off the market. Why are we not pulling this off the market? So he was initially very confused as to why they kept pushing this product out, regardless of the numbers of deaths that it had caused.
Right. All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. So stick with us, and we're going to talk some more about this. So be back in just a moment.
We have a big announcement, folks, something we've been waiting on for several months, and it's now here. It's called Bella Melt. You were on it for just 1 week when you lost 3 pounds. So in the first week, you lost 3 pounds on this, right?
That is correct.
Your GLP-1 is a natural hormone that's in every single one of our bodies. And your GLP-1 lets you know if you're full. It's a satiety hormone. So when your GLP is working properly, it does help suppress your appetite as well as reduce those cravings. It's a sugar-free, fast melt caramel. So what it's going to do best is it's going to reduce your sugar cravings or any other cravings you have in your body. It's going to suppress that appetite. But where Melissa got the most benefit, I think, over the last week was the L-carnitine. The L-carnitine tells your mitochondria, this is where you make, we've talked about it before, this is where you produce energy in your cells. It actually tells those mitochondria to burn fat for fuel. We're noticing other people losing up to 7 pounds in the first week. 4 pounds has been about the average. As you lose weight and as you take these Bella Melts, it's going to help lower that blood sugar in your body as well.
All the information is there. MelissaHouseBG.com, MelissaHouseBG.com. Just now introducing for the first time Bella Melt with GLP-1 fast action. It is a proven fact that China is in our power grid. They could bring down our grid anytime they want. Will you be able to communicate with family and friends? Well, I will, because they and myself have a satellite phone from worldviewtalk.com. Worldviewtalk.com. All you got to do is go outside, acquire a satellite, dial the number, hit send, and you are talking to your family and friends, even when all the cell towers are down. Worldviewtalk.com.
All right, welcome back to Code Blue. So we're talking about the autism spectrum disorder study that was done by the McCullough Foundation here recently, and they definitely found out that there is a risk factor for multiple vaccinations of the children, that it can cause autism. So this is huge, and so these studies are, people are looking at this. I mean, it's circling around on social media, getting hundreds of thousands of views. And, this is something that our government, the CDC, the FDA, et cetera, they're going to have to pay attention to at some point. And, we know that from just throughout COVID and the mRNA technology that the pharmaceutical industry has captured the FDA and the CDC in the past. We're praying that Kennedy, the new Secretary of Health and Human Services, can push forward and get things exposed. We know he wants to. It's a balancing act. If he's not careful, they will group together, band together, politicians, that is, senators, representatives, et cetera, and will try to oust him. And so he has to walk carefully. But reports like this that come out through the McCullough Foundation and others, when public awareness is key. And because it's really what we're praying for. We believe that if the politicians will get on board, we have heroes out there like Senator Ron Johnson and others. We have Dr. Joseph Ladapo in Florida, the Surgeon General. He's been a proponent for to have full disclosure of what's happening with the mRNA COVID vaccines. And so we're just praying that more people get involved, because ultimately, childhood vaccines are a big deal, and we do want them to be looked at very closely. And I will mention that, Dr. Peter McCullough, when we first met him in 21, I actually it was the first of 22. Dr. Peter McCullough and myself were invited to a conference in Tennessee where we both spoke. And, Dr. Peter McCullough at that point was not against childhood vaccines. Well, he wasn't against vaccines, period. He had always been a proponent of the flu vaccines and different vaccines, and had never not been vaccinated himself or recommended vaccines. So, he wasn't a quote unquote anti-vaxxer before COVID. And so when he came on board, he was very credible. But I think like Brooke and myself, as COVID, as we saw what happened with COVID and the mRNA vaccine, we became, we looked into it further. You would think, me being a doctor, I would have some reservations with vaccines, but we're just taught from bottom up, really, to trust the CDC, the FDA,